The philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche started as a critique of nationalism, idealism, and Christianity. It started as a definite note to ideas that overstep and reside beyond human experience, concepts like the soul, freedom of will, and God. It opposed ideologies that gave man a privileged position in the universe, lulling him in a state of uniqueness and self-satisfaction. Nietzsche condemned every worldview that ignored the fact that humans are fundamentally organisms, bound to the laws of nature, and that their actions deeply serve the purpose of sustaining and strengthening them as living organisms. In that sense, Friedrich Nietzsche was profoundly a philosopher of life. He saw life as a continuous struggle for power, a conflict between the forces of decay and regeneration. With his work, Nietzsche wanted to liberate humanity from the intellectual and ethical constraints of the past and make us aware of our new possibilities. In this series, we will go over the fundamental features of Nietzsche's philosophy and show what makes his thinking still relevant today. What is the value of the human mind? And does it allow us to determine what is true and what is false in the world? In our civilization, it is widely held that the mind allowed us to raise above animals, to establish languages and societies, and to master the skill of abstract thinking. Plato spoke of the mind as the only means of transcending the changing nature of this world and reaching the ideal domain of the beautiful, the good, and the true. His theory became an integral part of Christianity and had a strong influence on the concepts of the soul, afterlife, and the divine. Modern rationalism, beginning with Descartes, considered the mind to be our only stable source of knowledge about the world. And in the philosophy of Hegel, the mind was raised to the status of a universal principle, directing the development of human history. However, Nietzsche asks, why? Why do humans pay such great homage to the mind? He puts forward a crucial concept: truth. From the classical beginnings of philosophy, it was believed that the power of the mind had a special connection with truth, that our emotions and senses may deceive us, but that the mind will steer us in the right direction. That logic not only helps us organize the world, but that it is in some mysterious way the essence of the world, reality itself. Here we again reach a Platonic principle. Through truth, the mind reaches the idea, and the idea is ultimate reality. But Nietzsche sees a tautology in this. If we consider the idea the essence of reality, then we are bound to take anything that the mind presents us with as the truth. That is, the mind is able to justify endless claims about reality, but no fact of reality can justify the mind. With this in view, Nietzsche proposes that humans have a special relationship with the mind, an affective relationship. He states that humankind has never seriously investigated its motives towards rationality, because those motives were from the start deeply irrational. Here we come back to the concept of truth. What is truth for us? In our experience of it, it is something solid, clear, and well-defined, an alignment of the internal idea and the external world. It gives us certainty, strength, and even joy. In other words, Nietzsche claims that our propensity for truth is rooted in the effects it has on our well-being. That far from being able to provide us with a cold, dispassionate view of the world, the mind is in fact the most colored medium, the most cherished possession of mankind. But if this is the case, a philosopher would have the highest reason to suspect its glorification and to confront it with a rigorous outside perspective. To do this, Nietzsche outlines a history of the mind in its relation to human evolution. He begins with a vision of humans as not particularly strong animals, nor very fast or vigorous. Their newborns require protection for the longest periods of time, and they are not suited to endure extremes of climate or temperature. However, they have developed a specific skill, language. Wandering through the world, they encounter many dangerous things, like lightning or wild animals. In some cases, they react to the feeling of fear or anxiety by emitting a sound. Occasionally, they will want to warn the other members of their community, and they will do this by repeating the sound with which they initially reacted. If this sound is repeated regularly, and if it is consistently used for a certain thing, the impression of lightning for instance, it will permanently be associated with that phenomenon. This is where Nietzsche sees the origin of logic. Consistency in the rules of communication gives the group a higher chance of adapting to significant events. Far from being a free designator, therefore, language was invented for invoking certain impressions that were crucial for the survival of humans. The importance of the fixed sound was less in its expressiveness, and more in its value as a sign, a symbol of pleasant or dangerous occurrences. Later, with the invention of writing, the initial sound was further reduced to a character on a piece of material. It no longer needed to manifest as a single utterance, but could be combined with other characters to form more complex structures of ideas and representations. This is where Nietzsche sees the origin of the mind. The mind is the internalization of living speech, and of the concepts it was meant to invoke. Through this, the mind is fundamentally linked to the process of abstraction, withdrawing impressions from the world and ordering them inside our own safe internal space. This process gave humans a new stability in the face of nature. They were no longer abandoned to just reacting to outside phenomena, but had the power to interpret, predict, and tame them. Still, this brings Nietzsche back to the initial question: how does any of this prove the ability of the mind to determine truth? Nietzsche believes that it doesn't. In fact, he believes that it's not the truthfulness of the mind that allowed humans to master the world, but that because humans mastered the world using the mind, they created the myth of its truthfulness. They separated it from themselves and inscribed it into reality, honoring it like a universal faculty. But then for Nietzsche, this is not a question of truth, but of value. Human beings are led to identify the world with their understanding of it, because the mind has a unique value for their existence. That is, the mind is an inherently human faculty, sprung from the instincts of its creator. If considered from an animal's point of view, for example, the human mind would look like a deviation, an unexplainable violation of the natural order. As Nietzsche writes, "How insubstantial and transitory, how purposeless and arbitrary the human intellect looks within nature. There were eternities during which it did not exist, and when it has disappeared again, nothing will have happened. The intellect is human, and only its own possessor and progenitor regards it with such pathos as if it housed the axis around which the entire world revolved." Now, it is important to explain the character of Nietzsche's critique. To begin with, Nietzsche is not an irrationalist, nor a Rousseauist. He doesn't believe that humans should go back to a more primitive, intuitive state, nor that they should abandon the achievements of the mind. Instead, he counts himself in the tradition of the philosophers of the Enlightenment, like Voltaire or Diderot. He wants to elucidate the real workings and dispel the mystifications. He is in fact a continuation of the Enlightenment, a stage where the mind begins to think critically about its own purpose. In that sense, Nietzsche claims that humans are at a point where they have established such domination of the external world that they no longer need to adhere to the myth of rationality, that they can finally recognize the mind for what it is, a power, and not just any power, but a creative power, a unique human expression of the will to survive, the will to live. He compels us to see that the laws of reason and the entire domain of the mind are not independently existing realms, but the consolidations of a long struggle with the natural condition, a forceful thrust upwards. Here we come to another specific trait of Nietzsche's critique. It has a distinct Darwinian undertone. It doesn't approach rationality from the standpoint of the mind, but observes it through the lens of human evolution. Nietzsche doesn't want the mind to talk of itself. Rather, he wants to uncover its history, its function within the greater purpose of human existence. To understand this better, we will have to go deeper into the mind and show how it interacts with the world. As previously mentioned, the faculty of the mind originates in the internalization of speech. The communal rules of that speech, once internalized, form logic, that is, the accepted and correct way of speaking or thinking about something. This is the basis of the mind's autonomy. It takes in impressions from the world and orders them into its grid of meanings. How exactly does it achieve this? Through identity. From the onset of language, the effect of identity has had a crucial role in human communication. Because the occurrence of lightning will always have a similar emotional effect on the observer, it will inevitably be signified by the same word. And over time, that word will not only signify the individual occurrence of lightning, but lightning itself as an idea. This is where Nietzsche sees the first falsification that language exercises on reality. It creates a state where lightning exists as an independent entity that occasionally manifests in the world. That is, language creates this duality between essence and existence. Nietzsche, however, believes that this duality is a falsity, because we never experience the pure essence of lightning, but only distinct events that merely leave a similar impression on us. That is, the sameness of the individual occurrences of lightning exists only in us. We use the same word only because of our tendency to react to it in a similar way. Therefore, language creates being from what we always experience as events. Language populates our reality with beings, where our senses only perceive processes. We say that the sun is, that it appears, only because we see it as something being and not something happening. This is why Nietzsche criticizes the very concept of being, and the inspiration for this he finds in the tradition of pre-Socratic philosophy of the Greek Heraclitus. Heraclitus himself taught that there is no being, only becoming in the world, that things are only the abstract stages of a grand movement of nature. He says that a man cannot step into the same river twice, because the river is a different river, and that he too is not the same man. That the world has no beginning or end, and that it is an eternal flux, a game of permanence and change. This is important for Nietzsche's consideration of language, since language gives birth to objects and attributes. We say, for example, the rock is cold, as if there is an independent essence of a rock and an impression of coldness that has manifested in this specific rock. And even coldness is a value relative only to what we humans would perceive as below standard temperature. In this sense, language never deals with absolutes, only with relations. Heraclitus says that the way up and the way down are one and the same. Indeed, the concepts of up and down, distance, proportion, only have any meaning from the human perspective. From the world, humans abstract perfectly straight lines and fixed points, through which they construct the concepts of space and time. These concepts they use to regularize their behavior and estimate the outcomes of their actions. Solidifying these categories in the world enables humans to orientate very efficiently in their environment. They are no longer abandoned to experiencing the world directly and being overwhelmed by thousands of impressions coming at them at every moment. Using the mind, humans can remember. Through verbal signs of phenomena, they can extrapolate, deduce, and separate the essential from the accidental. Through language, humans make the world reasonable, since, again, they associate its understandability with their own survival. Taking all of this into account, what should we think of truth? And again, can the mind help us reach it? To shed definitive light on this, Nietzsche approaches the problem of lying. As we can define him, a liar is someone who misuses the convention of language for his own advantage. He says, for example, that he is a friend, when he is in fact a thief. He says that a road in the forest is safe, when in reality there are wolves nearby. But let's consider the opposite case. What happens when the liar says that a certain river is perilous to cross, even though it could actually be traversed without risk? The involved community would consider him a benefactor, since in their eyes he has saved them from certain danger. Through this example, we can see that a lie will only be considered such if it brings tangible harm to the community, if it causes doubt and discord. If the lie implies unity and a feeling of safety, it will be treated as the truth, even though it might not correspond to reality. Here we reach the duality of language, because even though its effect is to designate and organize reality, its original and dominant purpose is the survival and well-being of the community. Whenever the adequate depiction of facts is perceived as being dangerous and destabilizing for the group, it will usually be rejected, and the claimant will be treated with contempt. In their original state, humans pursue truth only as a means of self-preservation. However, once they overcome this primal condition and form more complex societies, humans forget this original state. They begin considering the mind and truth as something in itself, something with an inherent value that has its own purpose in the world. That which was only human science for natural phenomena begins to count as the being of those phenomena, a higher, more true type of reality than the one we can experience. As Nietzsche says, what then is truth? A mobile army of metaphors, metonymies, anthropomorphisms. In short, a sum of human relations which have been subjected to poetic and rhetorical intensification, translation, and decoration, and which, after they have been in use for a long time, strike a people as firmly established, canonical, and binding. Truths are illusions of which we have forgotten that they are illusions. Metaphors which have become worn out by frequent use and have lost all sensuous vigor. In short, humans consolidate truth into reality. Their glorification of truth does not come from rational or spiritual motivations, but is a symbol of their victory over the fear of the natural state. In their myths and beliefs, humans do not search to know the world, but to humanize it, to create an imaginary order which invites them to live. This is the basis of Nietzsche's skepticism. He doesn't attack our ability to reach truth, but argues that we are not even interested in it, that our search for the true state of reality is only a metaphor, a more refined urge for domination. Again, Nietzsche does not want humans to return to the natural condition, nor does he want to diminish their primal instincts. In this point, he is, as mentioned earlier, a philosopher of the Enlightenment. He wants to show that the human mind, our categories and truths, are not independent higher entities, but creative expressions of adaptation and overcoming, our struggle for power. Nietzsche wants to uncover the deeply irrational sources of rationality, not in order to deny its value, but to make us look beyond the myth of the mind. In a somewhat Darwinian sense, he wants to show the animal in humans, not to negate their humanity, but to encourage them to overcome and demystify it, which also means to become a more advanced, more sophisticated type of animal. This is perhaps the most valuable point of Nietzsche's skepticism. He doesn't judge reality from the perspective of the mind. He judges the mind from the perspective of reality. This was the first part of our 6-part series on Nietzsche's philosophy. Since we're preparing more videos on this and many other topics, like and subscribe if you wish to be notified of upcoming releases. Also consider visiting our Patreon if you want to support what we do and help us grow the channel. You watch the things themselves, and we'll see you somewhere in the future.